Hello. Welcome to my other show. This is AhMuse, and my name is Susan Rushton, and this is the show on which I get to, I'm privileged to, I'm delighted to talk to people who listen to a muse, who have their own muse, who are creative, musical, creative people. And you heard the music while the credits were running, and my guest this time is, no surprise, a piano player whose name is Nancy Lee Harper. Nancy, welcome to my show.
Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, great.
I'm honored.
Well, thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
I first met Nancy when she was half of a house concert.
Duo.
Okay.
A duo with Alexandra Roeder.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and we were performing on historical instruments.
Yes. And Alexandra is the Auburn Symphony's
Principal
cellist.
Yes.
Yes. And you were playing on her piano.
Yes, an Erard from 1893.
It was beautiful.
Yes.
And she was playing on a historical
Yes,
cello.
yes.
And I was stunned by both of you, and I had already talked to her, and now I get to talk to you.
Thank you.
Nancy, you live in Auburn?
I live now currently in Auburn since 2013.
Okay. What brought you here?
That's a big question.
It's not on my list of questions to ask you, but
Right. Well, for the 21 years prior to that, I was a professor at a university in Portugal, and there's mandatory retirement. So the question was, where do we go? We had built a house in France, intending to retire, but then the grandchildren started. So I said, no, we have to come to California. And some of the children live in Pasadena, and then we have another child in Victoria, British Columbia. And
so you're right in between.
We're in between,
Yeah.
and we have very good friends in Granite Bay, so that's
Okay.
one of the reasons we settled here.
Okay. Why were you, I see by your, well, first of all, Nancy's website is nancyleeharper.com, and she has a phone number, 530-613-3530. If you're interested in learning more about, do you give lessons?
I do teach. I was very fortunate to inherit a class of students. Unfortunately, the teacher died, who was also the principal keyboardist with the Auburn Symphony, Susan Carlson.
Yeah.
And before she died, she asked me to come and teach her students, and then 3 weeks later, they were mine. So, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a big shock.
Yes.
And of course, along the road, other ones come in. And so I have about 17 piano students now.
So if people want a piano teacher, they contact you via nancyleeharper.com.
Yes. Or
Okay.
through the phone number, or nancy.leeharper@gmail.com.
nancy.leeharper@gmail.com. Okay.
That's correct.
I downloaded this from your website, I believe. No, I downloaded it from your signature in your email to me. You are or were an associate professor with aggregation.
Yes.
What does that mean, aggregation?
Well, I'm still wondering myself. Actually, in Portugal, there are 4 levels to go up the ranks.
Okay.
And it's very difficult to get to full professor because it depends on the Ministry of Education to what area they wish to open a full professorship, and it's almost non-existent. Yeah. So the ranks are, the bottom is like our assistant professor, we call it auxiliary, and then you have associate, and then without having to compete, with anyone, you may apply for aggregation, which I suppose is distinction.
Okay.
And it's a 2-day exam, a public exam in front of a jury, and it's quite onerous, actually, because in the old times in Portugal, they would either give you a black ball if they didn't like you, the jury members, or a white ball if they did. And I got all white balls. I was relieved.
That's wonderful.
I was the first and the only so far in Portugal in the area of performance who received this distinction.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I sound like I'm surprised, but
No,
I'm
no.
not.
Yeah,
I'm really not
a
surprised.
very enriching experience to be there, challenging at times.
What why were you in Portugal?
Strangely enough, it was my husband who was invited to interview for a job at the Universidade do Minho in Braga in the north. And that's a very big change, so I decided to accompany him. And while we were there for his interview, his colleagues mentioned that they were putting applied music into the universities for the very first time in Portugal. Because as you know, Europe has the traditional conservatory tradition. And so I thought, well, perhaps I could get an interview. And so I tried, and eventually I did, 2 days before we were returning to the United States. And it went very badly. And I thought, well, that's that. I spoke in Spanish because I didn't know Portuguese. And the next day we were at the other campus with my husband, and they called me back, and so we went, and they greeted me like long-lost family. There were more professors, and they started speaking about salary and about conditions.
Ooh.
And I ended up getting that job because of my doctorate in music, because they wanted very much to have, you know, a good certified basis for introducing applied music. And
Oh, good.
so I was there 21 years, got a pension, and retired.
You were forced
I was
out.
forced to retire.
Forced to
But
retire.
actually, when I retired, I still had 3 PhD students, and I did their defense by Skype,
Okay.
and had 1 postgraduate student also, who's just finished in the last year.
Wow.
So I'm still a researcher with the research unit in Lisbon, because our university not only was a teaching university, but a university for research. And we pioneered some very interesting projects. The last 2 PhD students were in the area of music and medicine. So I was very proud of that.
How wonderful.
It really was fun. It was fun because it was truly a multidisciplinary, with a professor from the psychology department, a professor from biology department, and equipment we had developed at the university, and a kind of a cardiac monitor. And so
What
we were
music?
studying.
What, listening to music?
No. Well, yes and no. Primarily, we were curious about 3 things. One, we did a project with our students to see how they reacted to memorization techniques under stress. We gave them super learning.
Okay.
And I think the new methodology was probably more stressful than the actual practice. Another project was studying stress in silence, both from the standpoint of the performer and from the audience. And it was very interesting, the result. It was exact mirror or opposite, because the performer was stressed to the max and the audience was so relaxed. So that was curious. The third project...
Because it wasn't them.
That's right. Well, they were, yes, they were just listeners. And we did cortisol testing, we did this heart monitor, we did questionnaires, we did interviews. And the third project was studying stress in a long-term duo. It's like a marriage, you know. Why did I feel so stressful performing with them when I had performed for 14 years with them? So this was a very interesting study about stress and psychology of performance.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, speaking of performance, when Phil and Cody were running the credits, we heard you playing from the CD you have given me kindly given me, and that was you playing what?
This is a very interesting question. You may or may not know the very famous Italian composer Domenico Scarlatti, who's very much associated with Spain. What was brought to the Iberian Peninsula to Portugal by King John V, who was so wealthy. And so we have 3 big manuscripts. So this is a world premiere recording on the modern piano of a Domenico Scarlatti sonata that only appears in a Portuguese manuscript. And it doesn't appear anywhere else. So it's a sonata in A major.
Okay.
It's a lovely little piece.
All right. So we have another piece that they're going to play a little of. Cody is going to play a little of. And what is this?
This is also a 2-movement sonata by a Portuguese composer, but you can see that Italian influence. It sounds just like an Italian opera at the beginning.
Okay.
His name is Antonio Leal Moreira. It's a sonata in B flat.
Okay. Cody.
So like a comic opera.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's very charming.
All right. Thank you, Cody. So you have this DVD with a ton of pieces on it that I get to listen to after I go home.
Oh, good.
How do you choose the music? And this is not part of my questions.
I know. This is my third volume of Portuguese music, and I wanted to present Portuguese music because it's just simply not known. And I actually went on to research and write a book about Portuguese piano music. I was looking for, four-hand solo pieces, concerti, chamber music, all of that. And so much of it, whether it's been published or not, is lost, unknown, or the publishers go bankrupt. So one of the criteria was that it's never been recorded before, and to bring, even if it had been recorded, to bring a different interpretation to it from a non-Portuguese viewpoint.
Okay. Why the piano?
Well,
Nancy?
why not the piano? I mean, I was born to the piano. I can't
What
explain.
do you mean by that?
I can't explain.
I don't know.
I just remember when I heard the sound of the piano as a very young child, I would cry because I wanted this to play, this instrument. And it took me almost 10 years to convince my parents that they would give me lessons because they said we can't afford a piano and all this. And my father he went into the army, and he thought he was going to be drafted into the Korean War, but because he volunteered, they sent him to Miami, Florida, and we had a great life for 2 years. We were at a private lake and going to the beach and having a normal life for 2 years. And then we returned to my home state of Arkansas. And my grandmother had died. She had just died, so she left me her piano. And that's when the lessons began.
How old were you?
I was almost 10. It was just
Okay.
going on 10.
Okay.
And it was such a thrill. I remember I made huge progress, and by the time I was 14, I was playing the first movement of the Schumann Concerto with the orchestra, with Rudolf Gans conducting the Shreveport Symphony. Rudolf Gans was a very famous pianist, pedagogue, composer from Switzerland who taught at Chicago Musical College in those days. It was a very exciting time for me.
What is it you like about the piano?
I love the colors.
What do you mean?
The colors are all of the different sonorities that you can make with the pedals, or you don't have to use pedal, as you heard in that last story, the first two pieces that you've heard on this program, very little pedaling.
My goodness.
But
I don't play fast enough to not have a pedal.
It's a question of listening, always listening especially to the ends of the phrases or the end of the note, how it decays. And I did learn the harpsichord along the way, which I hated the instrument, but I was determined to learn this instrument so that I understood Bach. And then I learned the forte piano so I could really understand Mozart. And I ended up buying these instruments and had a professional career for a while in both of them.
So you understand Bach and you understand Mozart?
I understand much better now. I think we can always keep understanding. But I understood, and it taught me so much so that when I go back to the modern piano, I understand now how the articulations and the shadings. There are some things you'll never be able to do on modern piano that you can do on the historical instruments.
Why?
Because it's too slow. The decay is too slow, and on the modern.
What do you mean by the decay?
The sound is too slow to go away, whereas on the forte piano or the harpsichord, the sound quickly dies.
Disappears. Okay.
And they were often performed in these great acoustical venues, so whether they were cathedrals or palaces, and yeah. So, but the piano for me is the full orchestra. This is what I love about the piano.
It's
so
the full
expressive.
orchestra.
It's so expressive.
Because it can. Another pianist told me that he thinks the piano can sound like anything.
I agree.
Okay. Also, the human voice.
Yes,
he says.
totally. It should.
It should.
It should most of the time, unless you're playing very percussive music. I think that's the great goal of any pianist, is to sound like a singer.
Okay.
A good singer, of course.
Yes.
You don't want that, in the shower singer.
What do you listen for in your own playing? What do you hope for?
Continuity.
What do you mean?
And beautiful tone. I come from the school of Tobias Mattei and also Schnabel. But Mattei in particular, this was very interesting, the production of tone at the piano. It's very important to me. Everything must be in its place, the gesture, the ear, all of this. And once it's in its place, it's like a beautiful violinist. You can form the phrase, you know where you're going with it. And some of this is done by the arm, some is done by the fingers, some is done by the feet, and some is sometimes by all of it together.
I've watched and listened to many pianists, and the ones I like best do what you do, which is, it's not you, it's what I'm doing with the piano. It's the music I'm making.
Yes.
There's no flamboyance in when you play.
You have to feel really at ease with your instrument, and the worst thing for any of us is to have an instrument we don't like or is not responsive, because we can sound really quite different with a really fine instrument and less than our peak with a bad instrument or an instrument that's uneven. And often pianos are dead, you know, in that middle to upper range, right where we need that volume to sing and to express ourselves. So it can be very frustrating.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, I think we're going to listen to another piece.
Yes, and this is one by a contemporary Portuguese composer who is my colleague at the Universidade de Aveiro, João Pedro Oliveira, and he was champion for electronic music. He created really a whole generation of students in Portugal, and you know the economic conditions now are quite severe in Portugal. They're under austerity. So many of the young people have left and gone to Brazil or to England or wherever they could find jobs. and João Pedro himself is in Brazil now. Yeah.
And so this piece is different in that?
It's just, he calls it a teaching piece. I say, well, I don't have any students who could really play it, I don't think. And I've recorded other works and performed other works of his that can be quite difficult, but it's an electronic piece, so you must coordinate it with the pre-recorded track that you're hearing, and everything has to be timed just right. So it's not easy.
Okay. Well, let's listen to a little bit. Okay.
It's called Looking into the Mirror.
All right.
So what the electronic does, you do, and so
okay.
Bounces around.
So are you wanting to do more of that?
If I found interesting music,
hoping
yes.
Not.
No, if I found interesting music, yes, it could be. Yes, actually my first 2 volumes of Portuguese music were quite contemporary, so I didn't bring them along because they're more difficult to listen to. One was totally dedicated to the professors in our department, and others as well, contemporary music of Portugal.
Do you play much Schoenberg?
I have not really played much Schoenberg, no.
Why not?
I admire it. I just haven't had much opportunity to do it.
Okay.
Yes.
For those watching, Schoenberg is an atonal guy who...
Oh, 12-tone. 12-tone.
Okay.
Yes, he's credited for originating the 12-tone system where each of the 12 tones carry equal importance. Actually, I did my doctoral dissertation on the piano sonatas of Rodolfo Halfter, and the 3rd sonata is 12 tones. So, but speaking of Schoenberg, did you know that he and Gershwin used to play tennis together in Los Angeles?
That's what gave Gershwin his brain tumor.
That's probably true. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, okay. We have I've learned that you teach students. What advice do you give them?
Practice.
Practice.
You know, it's, I haven't been in this country for over 20 years, so assessing the situation, I would say that students are even more burdened with things, and they don't have time to reflect.
Possessions?
No, with things to do and things to occupy their times and distractions, you know, especially with all of this. And unfortunately, you know, the core disciplines of music and art and drama are usually cut out when there's a budgetary crisis. And I think that students need more time for the reflective arts. This is very important, so that they're not so fragmented. Often they don't concentrate, they can't concentrate. And I find a lot of learning disabilities now that I didn't see so often 20 or 30 years ago. Autism in particular, dyslexia, of course.
Is that, so, do we blame the absence of music in the curriculum?
I don't know what we blame. It might be our food. It might be that diagnosing these problems has gotten better. I don't know what it is. Music helps them tremendously, especially if they can move and they can feel it. And often the fine motor skills are very difficult for them, so we have to adjust and sing and do what we can to help them. Yeah, but they all improve.
And the fact that they improve as a result of playing music, listening to music, is what you tell people, this is why we need music in the curriculum.
We do, and often the music teacher's the first to realize there's a problem, and because we have that one-on-one contact, or sometimes we work in groups too, but it's in the one-on-one milieu that we see the problem very clearly, that they have eye-hand coordination problems, or they, whatever it is, yeah. Yeah, but it's important that they experience the joy of music. I feel that's so fundamental. Yeah.
So you are involved with the Music Goes to School program.
Oh yes, for 2 years I've had the great privilege to do this. I love watching the children's expressions when we make the music and when we speak about the music and the instruments. So the Auburn Symphony has a fabulous program, a fabulous committee who works very hard. And we just finished 21 concerts in 16 schools just last Friday.
Wow.
So I'm happy to be a part. We have to haul the keyboard around. Sometimes it's the organ, sometimes it's the piano. But we had a wonderful program this year. And of course, Randy Fisher is the main organizer, and he's just terrific with those children. Yes.
And we are talking about the Auburn Symphony, auburnsymphony.com. Our Auburn, my Auburn Symphony, our Auburn Symphony, and so tell me about these the kids and the music and you're listening to, you're watching them as they're listening. What
Well,
happens?
You notice right away the age difference from the little ones who are just so thrilled, and it's such a world of discovery, to the older ones, like maybe it goes through 6th grade or something, and they're much more mature and they're already playing in band, and we get them to work with us or sing with us as we did this year, or to make rhythms with us. And of course, the big hit is always Star Wars, or one of the movie films.
Yes.
And even if they don't know the music, it's so well explained, like what to listen for. You know, this year was the Primavera of Respighi, and which is the spring, and listening for the birds swooping into the trees, and listening when you're going out to play with your playmate. And so they are able to identify in classical music certain important messages, and I think that's great. You probably remember the Bernstein, the young people's concerts. So we all hold that as a model.
Yes.
It's very important in our lives.
Oh my, yes. What do you like about performing for adults in a group?
I love performing live. I find recording, as opposed to that, very, very difficult because it's very cold. But performing live is that interaction with the audience, and you gauge certain things according to how you sense that they are listening. You may time something a little differently. You may breathe a little differently. You may change your program because it's not working for that audience. In April, I'm going to be performing at, I'm sharing a program as a solo pianist with William Welburn, who's a professor at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. And we're performing in the senior Sun City in Lincoln Hills. And we'll be sharing that, doing Mozart and Liszt and Chopin. And I'm going to play a Portuguese piece by Antonio Fragoso, a young, wonderful Portuguese composer who died before he was 21 of the Spanish flu. And we're going to close with some Dvorak four-hand pieces.
Oh,
so it'll be a
wow.
really fun program.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is, we are recording this now at the beginning of March 2016. So, so April when?
22nd.
22nd.
On a Friday at Sun City, Lincoln Hills.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
they have a concert series there.
That's wonderful.
Yes, and I believe I'm also playing with Alexandra and on harpsichord at the Pioneer Methodist Church here in Auburn on sometime in March. I don't recall the date, and again in May.
Okay.
I believe, or I'm sorry, in April and in May. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Wonderful.
So Baroque music.
All right.
Yeah.
We have to stop, Nancy.
It goes by quickly, doesn't it, when you're
Yes,
having
it
a
does.
good time?
Nancy Lee Harper, thank you very
Thank
much
you
for joining
very
me.
much.
And if you want to learn from her or learn more about her, go online at nancyleeharper.com or give her a call 530-613-3530. My name is Susan Rushton, and it's been a thrill to talk with you, and a thrill to talk with you, Nancy.
Thank you, Susan. My pleasure.
Yes. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.